All right, hi everyone. Thanks for joining us to discuss how Edmunds tracks earned media quality. As the operators of the largest news media database, the team at Onclusive are excited about this topic and to share these learnings from the Edmunds communications team. Today, we're joined by Talia James Armand, the Associate Director of PR and Communications for Edmunds, the leading car shopping content publisher website driven to make car buying easy. The Edmunds team of automotive experts shares the latest cars and trucks with comprehensive reviews, first impression drives, and advice on car buying, selling, financing, and safety. The Edmunds story is quite impressive. With its roots as a paperback newsstand publication from the 1960s, which has now grown into one of the most beloved and well-known automotive resources of the 21st century. Talia is a senior member of the Edmunds communications team and is responsible for developing internal and external communication strategies that drive business growth. Prior to Edmunds, Talia was a senior account executive at Edelman and has held marketing and communications roles at Qualcomm, WebSense, and the University of California, San Diego. Welcome, Talia.
Thanks, Kelly. It's great to be here today.
And I'm Kelly Bird, Senior Director at Onclusive, formerly Air PR. I work with our customers to ensure that they get maximum value from our data to track their achievement of both marketing and business goals. My background is in communications and marketing for nonprofits, startups, and Fortune 100 companies. And for those of you who don't yet know Onclusive, we are the data science company for communications. Our software empowers PR and content teams to measure the actual business impact of communications and content marketing across the entire consumer journey, including reader engagement, brand impact, and sales. So during today's session, we're going to talk about what metrics are most helpful for proving the business value of communications, how to incorporate qualitative metrics into measurement and reporting, not just quantitative, why to consider article relevance and publication reputation in your measurement, and strategies for sharing earned media metrics with executives. So now we all know earned media is not easy to obtain. And when you do get that press coverage that you've worked so hard to earn, the traditional metrics don't even begin to tell the story of the quality of your content or its impact on your business. We've all seen reports that show total number of articles. That doesn't really tell us much about the effectiveness of communications. Number of impressions, really? Did the entire readership of the publication actually see the article? Some reports show billions of impressions for a single campaign, and the math just doesn't make sense. And then there were advertising value equivalents. May that metric rest in peace. In my opinion, some of these metrics have actually hurt our industry and also our credibility. And we need to measure the impact of earned media across each stage of the consumer journey. And taking the first step in that journey begins with understanding the quality of the content. Tracking quality can start with share of voice, which establishes the competitive baseline. And share of voice by itself, though, doesn't really tell the full story. In order to really understand if we're headed in the right direction, we need to study media coverage through a different lens. And first, we need to understand how relevant particular coverage is to the brand. Were the articles really about the company, or was the company mentioned in the headline or mentioned multiple times throughout the article, or was it just like a passing mention? And this helps frame the quality of coverage. And then auditing the publications where coverage occurred. Was it in highly reputable or tier 1 outlets, or was coverage mostly in smaller, less authoritative publications? And what about your target media? How are you doing there? And after that, really looking at the level of social media amplification of press coverage. And this can be a proxy for reader engagement, and it also helps to measure the amount of additional shared media that's generated. And being included in trending stories, as we all know, can be gold. And of course, understanding the sentiment of press coverage is a key measure of quality. It's one thing to get a lot of coverage and even have that coverage be in target media outlets, but is it positioning the brand in a positive light, especially in comparison to competitors? So now that we've talked about the process, let's shift gears and have Talia speak about Edmunds' communications objectives and strategy, and how a leading category brand, who is also a top media publisher, measures and optimizes its PR performance.
Thanks, Kelly. You called out a really interesting point, which is that Edmunds is not just a brand in the auto industry, we're also a top media publication. This makes my job of media relations and communications somewhat unique to other consumer brands. We have three main objectives. One is to simply raise awareness of the Edmunds brand and create more top-of-mind consideration for us as an authority in the automotive space. Our second objective as a media publisher ourselves is for our PR efforts to drive consumer traffic back to our website and increase engagement with our reviews, articles, videos, and all of our other owned media content. And finally, our third objective is to highlight our unique market insights to our key business audiences. This includes automakers and dealers, and we do that in order to position Edmunds as a valued business partner. All right, moving on to our PR strategy. To achieve these objectives, we leverage a thought leadership strategy that's designed to position Edmunds as an authority and the top source of consumer and market insights for the automotive industry. We continuously monitor media trends for opportunities to insert Edmunds into breaking news, where we can lend a third-party objective voice. And as a trusted resource for proprietary data and unique industry insights, journalists typically turn to Edmunds to validate the trends that they're reporting on, which helps us secure prominent placements in those trending stories. One of our most effective levers is our team of internal experts, both analysts and editors, who have really earned a reputation for being a credible, reliable resource to other media outlets. And those journalists frequently quote their opinions and commentary to balance out their news, their sources and stories. As a media publisher ourselves, we're in the editorial business. We've become a destination for consumers who are seeking the latest objective news on the automotive industry. And our editorial team publishes roughly 20 pieces of vehicle-related content weekly, which helps us rank at the top of many car-related Google searches, and also helps to drive significant social media traction for our own articles and videos. And now more than ever, consumers have burning questions and are seeking advice on buying, financing, and selling their vehicles. They need real help and access to resources given the stress on the economy and the current health crisis. And our content is really developed to ensure that they get that critical information, but in a way that feels like they're talking to their expert car shopping friend. So the true engine that drives our content strategy is the proprietary data and market insights generated by our industry experts. Jessica Caldwell is at the forefront of this. She leads the insights team at Edmunds, and they actually leverage millions of real vehicle transactions and other Edmunds data to develop really unique insights into consumer car shopping behavior and trends in the automotive market. She's also one of our primary spokespeople at Edmunds. She frequently appears in media outlets like CNBC, the Wall Street Journal, New York Times, basically any outlet you can think of, she's probably appeared in at least once or twice over her tenure at Edmunds. And Jessica has really deep industry experience as well. She previously worked for Mitsubishi and Subaru. And on her team as well is Ivan Jury. He's another fantastic spokesperson with deep knowledge of the industry, really specializes on the used car market and can also give some great consumer advice. I've personally taken advice from him for shopping for my car. And he has industry experience as well, having worked at JD Power and Honda. So our content distribution strategy is very proactive at Edmunds. We're regularly publishing reports on the automotive industry trends based on our market knowledge. And then we publish that content to journalists through news releases and media advisories, as well as promoting the content through our own website and social media channels. And we promote those same reports to our business partners through email and our own channels and social media as well to further highlight our thought leadership and offer valuable insights that really helps our clients navigate this changing landscape. And finally, we have a unique content partnership with the Associated Press that was initially established back in 2017. Through this partnership, every week we have a story written and bylined from one of the experts on our editorial team, and that's syndicated out to AP's network across the country. And this includes outlets everywhere from the New York Times down to the OC Register. And thousands of these stories were placed last year for Edmunds, which was really great. And the best part is many of these stories also have links back to the Edmunds website, which gives us incredible search value. In terms of performance metrics, we have a pretty mature measurement framework that focuses on a combination of the quality of our press coverage as well as our performance against our competitors. We look at range of metrics starting with share of voice for competitive volume, but I also look at power of voice as our competitive quality score. Social media amplification helps us understand how our coverage is trending. And we also like to think about the overall success of our media relations efforts in terms of target media placements. Lastly, we've developed a proprietary metric called quality coverage, which I will describe in more detail in a few minutes. So to take a closer look at our core metrics, let's take a look at the Inclusive Media Monitoring Platform. As I mentioned, we start our analysis by looking at our share of voice. How much overall press coverage are we getting versus the competition? As you can see here, we've earned a 43% overall share of voice year to date, which puts us at the top of the list. But these share metrics are not static. So it's also really helpful to see how this trends over time. You'll notice that there are certain weeks on this slide where competitors gain a little bit of traction in terms of share of voice. It really fluctuates depending on the news cycle, and it's helpful to understand how all of us are taking advantage of those topics. To complement our share of voice analysis, which looks at the total quantity of coverage, I also like to understand what our power of voice is against the competition. Power Voice shows the quality of our coverage by calculating the reputation of publications that are covering Edmunds, plus the relevance of that coverage to us, the level of social media engagement our coverage is receiving, and the tone and sentiment of our coverage.
Talia, power of voice is such a useful metric, and as a complement to share of voice, it really tells a more complete story about PR and communications performance. And for Edmunds, it's impressive to see that your power of voice actually improves to 48% from your 43% share of voice, which tells us that you're not only winning in the volume game, but also doing better in terms of quality. So well done.
Thanks, Kelly. We also look at our social media engagement as an isolated metric outside of our power of voice. Here's how our coverage has trended over time this year. In this example, we look at our share of social media amplification versus the competition. Again, on this slide, you'll see that there's some periods where particular competitors challenge us. But overall, it's nice to see that our press coverage is amplified the most overall. And in this case, we've earned a 53% share of amplification year to date. Tracking target media placements is another way for us to monitor our performance against the competition. As you can imagine, we're all working to secure coverage in a very similar set of outlets. This is a combination of automotive-related publishers, as well as tier one consumer, business, and occasionally tech publications as well. Given how competitive this process is, it's not surprising to see a slightly more even score, but we feel really good about the fact that we have a 32% share against our target media outlets. And finally on this slide, here's a look at a proprietary metric which we developed called quality coverage. We initially developed this metric to really help demonstrate to our leadership at Edmunds the greater value that we're generating in earned media beyond a mention at the brand level, which Kelly mentioned earlier, by showing coverage that clearly leans on Edmunds' expertise, data, or insights. As I mentioned previously, we have a unique partnership with the Associated Press. This metric factors the number of Edmunds AP byline placements in affiliate media outlets, along with Edmunds analyst quotes, editorial quotes without AP because they're the ones who byline the AP articles, and any usage or references to Edmunds' proprietary industry data. And so for this particular analysis, we look at both the total volume of quality coverage placements as well as the ratio of total placements that are considered quality coverage. And you can see that Edmunds is really leading the charge. So all of these metrics we just reviewed were aggregated over the full 2020 year-to-date period. So that was a pretty high-level analysis. Let's take a look at a more detailed example of Edmunds' performance within a specific campaign, our COVID-19 response campaign from March 2020 to date. And since our entire competitive set also communicated around the pandemic, we can use the same set of metrics to benchmark against the competition. First, you'll see that we all issued responses pretty early in March, but Edmunds was actually one of the first to compile a really comprehensive overview of car payment relief options for consumers, as more and more consumers experienced financial hardship and were seeking answers that weren't immediately apparent or readily available. And while we did have the lion's share of coverage that month, all of our competitors did a pretty good job of getting pickup on that topic during March. But starting in April, you'll see that we really took over and have continued to dominate the coverage every month since by tapping into topics that really helped frame the biggest trends facing the industry, from monthly sales forecasts to automaker earnings, finance trends, car shopping deals, car shopping holidays like Labor Day and Memorial Day, and rising demand in the used vehicle market. And all of those obviously were impacted by different factors of the pandemic. So this culminated in a total 57% share of voice around COVID-19. And this really speaks to the demand that our expert analysts, for our expert analysts, and how much media is looking for their unique perspective in the market to help offer actionable advice for consumers. More exciting is that our power of voice is even stronger at 59%. So while we're winning the volume game, our quality has been better than the competition all year.
I just have to say again, Talia, that is really impressive. To dominate the media with both the most as well as the highest quality coverage is not a trivial thing. So what about your strategy is driving such strong performance?
Sure, that's a really good question. To better understand what's driving our success, let's take a look at some of our Power of Voice driving articles. The top article on here reflects a recent proactive media push from Edmunds on how used vehicle prices and values are spiking as more car shoppers turn to the used market during COVID-19. This topic continues to generate some of the greatest interest and coverage because used cars retaining or even appreciating in value is such a unique and unprecedented trend that the industry and consumers haven't really seen in recent years. And the second article is an example of an AP Bylines piece that took the industry trend that I just mentioned and turned it into actionable advice for consumers that could help them get even more money for their vehicle at a time when they probably need it most. And the Business Insider and Yahoo pieces addressed positive growth and sales stories for the industry, which is probably why they performed so well. I mean, everyone knows we could use some good news right now. And the last piece also touches on that same note of positivity for the auto industry by focusing on how some automakers retooled their factories to help build ventilators during the pandemic. Similarly, let's do a deeper analysis of our share of amplification, which shows that we've really trended around this topic. I made sure to check on what these figures look like for the same time period last year, obviously not COVID related, but the numbers that we've been seeing in terms of amplification for these top performing articles are in some cases nearly double or triple what we got for our top performing articles within the same time period last year. And when we look at our most socially amplified articles, we see it's mostly a different set of stories than those that drove our power of voice. 3 of the top drivers focused on how struggling rental businesses like Hertz could mean big deals for shoppers in the used market. Another article touched on a hot political topic pertaining to fuel emission standards under the current presidential administration. And the one exception on this list is the ABC ventilators piece, which I mentioned just a slide ago. And that has a place in both our top power of voice articles as well as our most socially amplified articles. So the big takeaway from this is that understanding what's really resonating on social media is incredibly useful to us. It helps us understand which strategies are likely to drive certain outcomes. And if the primary objective of a particular campaign is to capture engagement on social media, we can sort our coverage based on this specific metric.
I have to say, it's always interesting to see how some assumptions are validated with data like this, but while other publications and authors, which might not have been the most obvious sources of impact, are driving so much value.
Yeah, definitely. So looking at our success with target media, we've actually done a better job here as part of our COVID-19 response than we have across our PR more broadly. We've achieved a 43% competitive share and have been the #1 most successful brand in our category every month since March. Here's some good examples of our target media placements. We've achieved a strong mix of general consumer media with outlets like the New York Times, USA Today, and ABC, as well as automotive publications like Car and Driver, business publications like Bloomberg, and we specifically target the Associated Press, which drives incredible power of voice for us. Broadcast media is also an incredibly important target for us, which we've achieved great success with as well. Not necessarily shown on the slide, but most recently, Edmunds experts were featured in 2 exclusive back-to-back earned media segments on Good Morning America, which highlighted how used car prices are spiking during COVID-19 and really helped guide consumers on how to take advantage of the extra value in their vehicle by selling now.
Talia, your thought leadership strategy has you winning in virtually every category. So first of all, congratulations. And especially during this pandemic and recession, it's clear that both consumers and the media are looking to Edmunds as a trusted authority to help make sense of these times.
Thanks, Kelly.
Okay, well, so that brings us to the end of our analysis. But before we move on to Q&A in the second half here, I just want to wrap things up with a few final thoughts. So first of all, my biggest takeaway is that when you use data like social media amplification, target media placements, and power of voice, you can uncover powerful and unexpected insights about the stories, publications, and the authors that are actually driving business impact. And metrics like these help us move away from pure intuition or what we guess might have worked best to really understanding and thus the ability to optimize.
Sorry, I realized I was on mute. And I totally agree with you. I think my final takeaway is that quality can be measured in a number of different ways. And the final judgment of quality should be based on your specific campaign objective. Are you looking to dominate the most stories on a particular topic? Are you looking to trend on social media? Or are you launching a multi-dimensional effort, which is more focused on target media and spokesperson placements? At the end of the day, quality comes in a few different makes and models and should ultimately tie back to your goals.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that, Talia. And all right, so let's take some questions. I see a bunch in here, but if you haven't already, for everyone on, you can submit your questions using the Q&A feature right in Zoom. So let me pull up the first question here. How do you use measurement data to secure budget for your content and PR efforts?
That's a really good question. Obviously, budget considerations are really unique this year, but I'll use an example from prior to coronavirus as it particularly pertains to travel. Since we're based here on the West Coast, we have access to some journalists, but a lot of automotive publications and key writers are based in Detroit and in New York City. So one of the great opportunities that we have is auto shows like New York Auto Show, Detroit Auto Show, and other sort of like mid-year desk side briefings where we conduct little mini media tours with outlets that are there. And there are always questions, like rightfully so, from leadership on what the return on investment is for flying out, you know, some spokespeople and a PR person to go to one of those auto shows or out for, you know, a week or a few days to be meeting with these reporters in person. As a PR person, obviously, I'm sure as many of you might think as well, it's very important to make those connections in person. And even though you're attending a trade show and just walking, it seems like you're just walking around and looking at the press events and it could be done virtually. A lot of the valuable conversations that we had with journalists there led to some great coverage. So the one great thing about using a platform like Onclusive was we could actually track not just the coverage that was generated from being on the show floor, but also other topics that resulted from some of those conversations. And being able to really showcase that sort of diverse coverage that we received as a result of those sort of in-person events really helped validate the importance of why we needed to be out there more.
Yeah, I appreciate you. First of all, thanks for sharing that, but I appreciate you talking about those like follow-on stories, like not just, you know, what happened from the in-person presence and the conversations and the interviews at an event, but also, you know, maybe in the days, weeks, and I mean, sometimes even months that follow.
Totally.
Okay, here's another one. How do you measure share of voice? Quantity of clips in target outlets versus competitors? Is that maybe one way, or how do you look at that?
Yeah, so we look at share of voice in a variety of different ways. It's super helpful to know, like at a high level, what are, the total volume of coverage that our competitors are getting versus us at the brand level. But I also like using share of voice to dive into particular topics that are important to our business. So for example, what I just went over was COVID-19. I developed searches that show our share of voice pertaining to that particular topic. Right now, used cars are driving incredible value for car owners right now. So we're really looking and tracking at how that's performing, how we're performing in terms of any sort of appraisal, trade-in or sell conversations that are happening in media outlets compared to the competition as well. So I think that one of the great things about share of voice is you can look at it at that really high level, but you can also dive into much more specific campaigns and topics.
Thank you for sharing that. I'm going to answer a question in here, which is, can you talk more about share of amplification, what that means and measures? So, and of course, Talia, if you have something to add that I miss, please jump in. So for share of amplification, we're looking at the amplification, or really the engagement across social media of coverage. So do articles about a certain brand get liked, commented, shared, tweeted, retweeted, etc. Across social media, and how does that compare to competitors? So that competitive comparison piece is where the share comes in. What is kind of your share out there in the market? And the amplification has to do with the social media engagement around press coverage. Okay, so here is another one. Okay, congratulations to Talia and team on the great work. In terms of social amplification, that's a great macro view. How do you see your measurement approach or your use of the inclusive platform working for B2B or other brands that are focused on specific target audiences, where really it's really those audiences that they think are going to act on information that they're sharing or news that they're sharing?
That's a really great question. And thanks for saying that, first of all. One of the ways that I think that we use our media monitoring effectively for our B2B audiences, a great example that comes to mind is we have dealer clients, and that's one of our biggest B2B audiences. They obviously want to be able to tap into the consumer mindset, right? So I mentioned that story, or that trend that we're seeing right now, in the fact that there's so much demand in the used vehicle market because inventory is a little bit lower on the new side. People are, we're trying to encourage them to take advantage of the value in their vehicle right now by trading it in at their dealership, and dealerships are in desperate need of that inventory right now. If we're showing that we're communicating that proactive, dealer-friendly sort of message out to consumers through huge prominent placements in USA Today, or even on a local level, we just achieved a placement with NBC National Newsfeed that fed a segment on that particular topic to local news stations in over 110 markets just earlier this week. We can take those clips and those pieces of coverage, and we can go back to our clients on the dealer side and say, look, we're making sure that we're pushing your message out there. You need inventory right now. That's exactly what we're talking about to consumers. And they're trusting, consumers trust us, and they're listening to us, and we're also driving them back to our website. So you can be confident that, by working with us, you're getting access to these really engaged in-market car shoppers who want to do exactly what you want them to do right now.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, very targeted.
Yes.
This is kind of two questions rolled into one. It has to do with your Associated Press partnership. So I think just could you speak a little more to, I guess, the structure of that partnership? And someone asked, do you think that has had a big effect on your success as a brand?
Definitely. Yeah, so as I mentioned, this was established a few years ago, back in 2017. And it's, the partnership is really mutually beneficial. It is the Associated Press knew that they they wanted support in automotive related content, and they have some great auto raters, but they were really looking for more of that consumer advice sort of content, and they recognized that Edmunds was a great place or a great source for that. So like I mentioned, every week on Wednesday morning, so today I actually just pulled a few clips from that as well, we push out content, and it's everything from comparison reviews to, you know, capitalizing on the trend of selling your car right now to various other topics like how to use an auto show to shop for a car. And we definitely think that it has been super helpful and beneficial to us from an earned standpoint. The interesting thing is that even though it's guaranteed to be pushed out by AP over the wire, it's not necessarily guaranteed to be placed in all of their affiliate outlets. So it's really interesting to take a look and see at which particular articles might be resonating a little bit more. That's something that we track in terms of amplification or syndicates through the Onclusive platform as well. And that helps give us a good indicator of what sort of stories we want to be pursuing now that we're in our, you know, 3rd or 4th year of our partnership.
Okay, thank you. Okay, how do you communicate the value of metrics to the C-suite and have them understand the significance and the success when you're reporting on certain metrics?
Sure, I think that going beyond those initial metrics that you flagged at the beginning that are a little bit out of date, I think it has been really critical. Being able to show, you know, share a voice at the high level and at a more specific level, and showing how that particularly ladders into our business objectives as a company has been particularly helpful. That quality coverage metric that I put together, I think also has done a really good job of showing that, look, we're not just getting mentioned as Edmunds in, you know, like in one sentence in an article that says to like, look up how much a car is worth. We're actually putting our experts out there and driving key conversations about the auto industry and key conversations that consumers need to be thinking about right now. And I think that the other really great thing that we have now that we've been with Onclusive for, gosh, a number of years now, I think since 2016, is that we can look back at historical data as well. We can compare recently, you know, after putting out the first half of the year metrics and showing that to our executives, there was an anticipation, even on my end, that we wouldn't be achieving the same volume of coverage as we did compared to previous years for the first half of the year, because typically that's when all of the auto shows happen. That's when most of the biggest product news comes out for the industry. And in the absence of those big trade shows or big events, we were, you know, there was the expectation that maybe we wouldn't be coming in with as much volume of coverage. But the fact that we managed to bridge the gap and talk about COVID in a way that was authentic to our audiences and actually show that we still managed to drive a significant amount and volume of coverage, even compared to the year over year, I think was also highly valuable in communicating the value of earned media to the C-suite.
Yeah, that's huge, especially this year. So,
yeah, exactly.
Again, like, well done, seriously. Okay, here's a question I think for me. Who else like uses these metrics other than communications teams, and you know, what do they do with this data? So we also do have a lot of teams that are responsible for like owned media or brand content, like especially the content on your blog, or if you have a Medium channel for your brand or things like that. They can dig into all of these metrics as well for sentiment, for social media amplification, of course, also for share of voice versus your competitors in terms of volume of content that they too are putting out there. And we do have some other unique metrics specific to owned media content as well that are really helpful. We also have a lot of like marketing operations and marketing analytics teams. So particularly if your organization or if an organization does some pulling together of marketing data from different tools, like an Onclusive platform for communications and content, and maybe other platforms for advertising, and they're either putting that all together in one place, like a Tableau or something to visualize it, or putting it into like a media mix model. They also dig into Onclusive data, so it actually has quite a lot of implications across a marketing organization and can be really helpful data input for a lot of different audiences beyond, communications teams, which is great. And I think it also helps get more investment and more, hopefully dollar investment, but also just like attention investment and more, more eyeballs really, particularly up to an executive team on communications and on the fact that, you don't just have a PR team because, I don't know, we need one because everybody else has one. Just, just like you're not on Twitter just because, I don't know, everybody else is on Twitter, but actually because like the work that these teams are doing and that we're all doing is important, is, helping to change and to maintain reputation and advocacy, and to build communities, and again, to impact your business, which, could translate all the way to revenue if you have e-commerce.
Yeah, totally.
So here's another question for you, Talia, and it's talking about like KPIs. Do you look at your KPIs and your metrics differently, like overall for the organization, let's say on a monthly or a quarterly basis versus like specific programs or specific campaigns?
Yes, yes, to answer that in short, yes, we do. So we obviously have the more detailed analysis for earned media relations that happens at my level. But that gets reported into the marketing organization, which is what I report into. My manager is the vice president of marketing, and she oversees our analytics team, our insights team. So we're pretty good about rolling up all of our sort of measurements and metrics into that organization. And then she in turn reports that as part of the regular cadence with the rest of the leadership. I think that being on the marketing team with those other groups has been super helpful, like to what you were talking about earlier about making sure that other departments or other teams are seeing the metrics that you have available and using it for other use cases. Recently, I mentioned that Good Morning America, those two Good Morning America segments, and we were trying to figure out if it had any sort of relationship to a huge spike in traffic that we saw on our website. And our analytics folks managed to look at our website traffic data, and they were able to narrow down to like the minute when the segment hit, and they mentioned Edmunds was when all of that came in. So I feel like this year has been just fantastic. We've been super integrated. We're thinking about metrics from an SEO standpoint and from an analytics standpoint, and we're also looking at earned media as well. And we're trying to make sure that we're reporting on all of that from a very comprehensive perspective as well. And it's just worked really well for us.
Yeah, that looking down to, that level of like attribution for PR and being able to see that, yes, indeed,
so
it was.
good. I feel like it's very rare for that to happen with earned media. I just have to say, I was like, there's no way that this is the case, but it was really cool to be able to validate that for sure.
It's kind of funny to me that even you were skeptical.
Right.
Like, well, we did get we were mentioned on Good Morning America, but I'm not sure if that's the reason that more people came to our site today, but indeed it was. And, and yeah, I think, thanks for sharing also just about how, across your marketing organization, and different functions, obviously, including communications, but beyond that, there is more conversation around this data. I think a lot of us, like, listen, I'm definitely a more verbal than math person, if you like throw back to my SATs, and somehow I work with data. Yeah, and somehow I work with data every day. And I think a lot of people are hesitant, like, I don't want to deal with these numbers, and I don't want to start showing this, particularly not to my executive team, because then they're going to start asking for it and you're going to be accountable to that. But I think we often forget how helpful it really is. And again, like showing our value, and that can be both as an organization and I mean, honestly, also as an individual, right? Like taking data to your performance review and taking data to those types of discussions is, that really gives a strong proof point.
Yeah, and Edmunds is such a numbers-driven organization, so being able to apply that lens to our PR efforts, I think has been incredibly helpful, especially for leadership to understand the value that it's driving for the business.
Yeah, and for you to understand it too and be able to speak to that like with confidence, and not just like, well, I know we got
Yeah, it's awareness,
GFA,
like generally just brand awareness that might go
right,
out to 8 million people, which is how many people they say watch their show, but like, can you guarantee that all of them are watching? Yeah, exactly.
right, right, exactly. Someone had a question about whether or not in using inclusive platforms, they can track traditional media. So I'll answer that. Yes, you can. So you can track both, if by traditional you mean print or like broadcast TV and radio coverage, you can track all of that coverage as well as online coverage in the tool. So no need to have like, you know, multiple platforms for one for like traditional media and one for more like online or looking at some of these social metrics and things like that. Luckily, we can do it all in one place. Okay, so here's one question. Are all of your, I see, okay, this actually I think is a question for me too, really. So someone's asking, are the analytical comparisons basically like if we got down to looking at visits to website or, you know, actions taken by those visitors, which could be considered conversions, can we also do that as a competitive comparison? So the answer to that is no, but that's because of course, you know, we're not also going to be pulling in website data from your competitive companies. So, you know, we are able to get down to that level of detail for any brands that are working with inclusive. For competitors, we can still look at share of voice for volume of coverage, power of voice for, you know, the quality coverage that's really coming through. And I'm going to explain in a second how power of voice is calculated, because there was a question on that as well. You know, we can still look at sentiment, we can still look at the social media amplification. So there's a lot of helpful information we can have for competitors. We just, you know, we're not going to be having their website data. You know, that's not something we'll share across brands or we could access openly. And in terms of power of voice, so there's 3 different factors that go into calculating that. And we went for alliteration. So they all start with R. The first one is relevance, meaning how often is a brand mentioned in an article, how relevant is that piece of coverage to you? So going back to that, is it more of a feature story or, you know, just an inclusion or a mention where maybe the brand is just mentioned one time? The relevance filter really helps to make sure that you are more likely to be looking at those feature stories. The second part is reputation, and that's taking into account the publication where the article was published. So we talked a little bit about that in the presentation. You know, is it just, let's say, somebody's blog, like personal blog, or is it, you know, a more like top tier outlet, let's say like the Wall Street Journal, for example. So the reputation really helps to surface that in terms of the publication quality. And then the third and final factor is repetition. And that actually is that social media amplification. So, you know, it gets shared, repetition. So maybe something is published by a smaller outlet or, you know, a personal blog again, or something that wouldn't necessarily be on like a list of target media. However, you know, maybe they published one blog post or one article that got like hundreds of thousands of, you know, social shares and engagements and comments and likes and tweets and retweets and all of that. And so, you know, we also want to surface that for you so that maybe it doesn't mean that that publication is going to be at the top of your list for every story you tell through the rest of the year. But, you know, we want you to know that that individual article, blog post, or, you know, piece of content is having some impact on like the power of your brand voice out there in the market. So, you know, that can be really helpful information to help continue to be more targeted moving forward. Okay, so I'm going to take just a few final questions here. Here is, let's see, sorry, some of these are kind of repeat questions, so I'm just scrolling through. Okay, here's a good one. I think this is a good tie-on to what you just spoke to, Talia, in case there are like specific talking points that you speak to. First of all, someone said, such great insights, thank you. I'm glad to hear that this is helpful. Do you have any tips for making the business case to senior leadership around the need for, you know, media monitoring, you know, especially when you have budget constraints?
Definitely. Yeah, I think that that's historically been an issue for many PR people since the beginning of PR. I think that one of the best ways to kind of make the case for that is if you can actually if you can actually look at the way that other departments are reporting on their success within the company. Like I mentioned, Edmunds is a very numbers-driven organization. So it wasn't too hard to make the case for, hey, like, look at the way that the analytics or the SEO team is reporting on their success or their results. We want to be able to show that we're doing the same thing for our PR efforts as well. And we found this, we found this platform, Inclusive. This is the level of detail that we can get into. Like, I think that, trials tend to be free. Are they free, Kelly, for you guys? But like, even getting a glimpse into some of the metrics that you can showcase that you wouldn't normally be able to show just from manual searches on Google. And I have to tell you, like, I spent many an intern late night just like dying trying to like find all of the articles that weren't showing up and doing that same sort of analysis. Like, the great thing about a platform that you really like what we have is that it pulls all of that information in for you, so you don't have to do those manual searches. It will automatically like help you set up all of your reporting templates. So it'll save you time, but it also gives you that level of insight for the competition as well, that you wouldn't normally have without a monitoring service. Like I said, I've done it before in the past manually, but I definitely think that a lot was missing, and I wasn't quite able to get into the same competitive measurement or comparison as I have in years past.
Yeah, well, first of all, I feel your pain. I did lots of manual multiple day reports on like, how much coverage did we get today and which outlets, especially on announcement day. Oh my gosh, exactly. That can be a nightmare. So first of all, luckily everyone else on this call, you don't have to do that because tools like this exist now. And also, in terms of stating the case for like, getting the budget for something like this, as you said, Talia, I think the competitive comparison piece is huge, right? But also, like, you can talk about how much time you are able to save through all of this automation, right? That means time that you can spend on,
actually doing the work, actually promoting things, right? As opposed to, reporting,
Right, like being more thoughtful about the stories you're telling, being more considerate about the publications you're speaking to, being more targeted and like more specific, like, I mean, the last thing that, especially if you have any spokespeople or executive level spokespeople, like the last thing they want is to go to an interview with a publication and realize halfway through, like, they don't even know who we are or what we do, like, so even talking about that, I know like on our website, we have a couple case studies about how much time some other brands have been able to save in automating reporting with tools like ours. But yeah, I mean, I think that's a key piece when you're, kind of like stating the case is, I can spend so much more time on all this other work that really can be more impactful and still be able to report, and not only just about our brand or business or organization, but also about our competitors, and keep an eye on that. I mean, there's an eye being kept on that while you're sleeping, right? So that's really helpful. Okay, so one last question for you, Talia. Someone was asking, like, what was we talked a little bit about your background and having been at Edelman and a few other organizations, but what was the path that like led you to Edmunds and influenced your choice for this company?
Sure. Yeah, I took kind of a non-traditional route when it comes to PR, where I started off at a big like Fortune 500, and then I went to the agency, which everyone thought I was absolutely insane, but I absolutely wanted that experience. And when I joined Edelman, it was here in Los Angeles. I got exposure to a lot of different types of companies and brands. And when Edmunds gave me the call, it was so interesting to me. The fact that, like I mentioned earlier, my role is really interesting. I'm trying to raise awareness for the brand, but we're also a content publisher. Like, we're also an editorial platform as well. And I've never really had experience working with a company like that before. And just the level, like the volume of top tier media placements that this company gets. I was like, who are these guys? Like, I want to learn more about them. I didn't know too much about cars before I started, but now I have such an appreciation for the automotive industry, like working closely with our insights teams, and just being able to say that, I work for a company that is so trusted and so well regarded by consumers, and getting calls from these like amazing media outlets on a regular basis who really rely on us for our valuable information. It's been one of the most fulfilling jobs that I've really had in public relations and communications. And then there's also that whole other aspect, which is the B2B communications piece, which is something that I feel like has been really expanding my experience as well. It's been wonderful. Like I mentioned, I worked for a larger company like Qualcomm, which was also, you know, very eye-opening and great for the beginning of my career. But with big companies comes a lot of red tape and legal red tape, and working for a small privately owned company like Edmunds has given me so much flexibility. And I feel like it really, I really get an opportunity to have a true impact on the organization that I haven't necessarily felt at larger places. So it's been great.
Yeah, well, really, really glad to hear that. And I think I just want to say, like, thank you everybody for joining today's session. We really appreciate all of the questions. We had a lot of questions come in today, covering a lot of topics. So appreciate that, and special thanks, of course, to you, Talia, for joining us and for taking the time and for answering so many questions. We will be making a recording of today's sessions available. It'll be available at onclusive.com. And for a limited time, if anyone would like to try Onclusive's media monitoring solution for free, sign up for a trial at onclusive.com/trial. If you have any follow-up questions for us, I know there were some in the Q&A we didn't get to today. You can contact us at info@onclusive.com. And again, as you can see here on the slide, onclusive.com/trial. If you haven't tried us out yet, and you wanna try free of charge, you know, for the next couple weeks. So thank you, everybody. I hope you have a great rest of the week. Thank you so much, Talia. This has been a really great discussion.
Thank you.